That's such an intellectual, amazing conversation. I think I'm going to give you guys a minute to transition if you're going to other rooms, and then also folks that are coming in, because this is all about like storytelling, structure, creating impact. So yes, we'll take a few minutes and we'll say goodbye and say hello. So anybody that wants to grab a drink of water or something else, we'll be starting in just a minute, and I'll be leading you guys through a bit about storytelling and why structure is important to create impact and how easy it can be. Hello, who's joining? Hi, everyone. So I'm coming to you guys from Bali. I'm actually from California, but I've been living in Bali for quite some time. And it was always sort of my dream to work remote, and I've been doing it for the last 8 to 9 years. Worked with tech companies. Wow, like that, where the wild things are. Oh yeah, that's a good story.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Talking about stories, I had to bring it to the table.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love it. Okay, so we have a short amount of time together, and really what I want to get across is we always talk about storytelling, and it's like, oh, another thing about story. We know story's important, but I want to show you guys like a really super easy format to make sure that you're nailing it with your audience as well as creating impact. So I just want to kind of impress upon you a few things, and then we can open up to questions. I know I can either be a talking head or I can share some slides. So I'm going to share some slides, and we're just not going to use them as like a verbatim word thing. We're going to actually just sort of use them as kind of pictorial visuals. So there you go. Okay. So everyone can hear me. And I'm sure at this point you guys can see my screen. So what I want to do is I'm going to quickly show you this little page of my sort of weird peppered resume. And I'm doing this for a reason. When I was in college, I sat at the counselor's desk, and I had an overabundance of credits, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was so like sitting in this hard chair, this big old desk in between me and the college counselor, whose face I couldn't remember. And they were just sitting me down and saying, hey, Jen, you got to pick a direction. You got to pick a major. You got to get out of school. You have an abundance of psychology classes. What do you want to do with your life? And I was just really overwhelmed and lost at that question. Like, what do I want to do with my life? I'm like 20 something. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I don't want to sit in this office and even answer the question about what I want to do with my life. Nor do I even want to answer that question for a while. I wanted to follow charm. I wanted to follow and discover out of under everyone else's wings, like what life is about, what I was interested in, rather than, just pick a major, pick a direction and answer the question and then find myself somewhere. So I just picked business marketing, because that was what my grade point would allow and everything else. And then I ended up finding a job and doing that whole internship to get blue suit, get there. And then I realized very quickly with an Office Space moment that this just wasn't for me. And I just quit and I went into acting. Well, look, that led to a series of 10 years of somehow moving around the camera, behind the scenes in production, or doing events, or writing, or doing broadcasting, and blah, blah, blah. And I came out of that 10 years after following all this charm, and I was like, how am I going to even explain myself? And I wasn't able to. And somehow I arrived at this very interesting place in time where storytelling was the in thing. And all of a sudden I didn't have to explain myself. All I had to say was, I love stories. I'm all about stories. And yeah, that's how I began my real passion in my career, is doing storytelling. So I want to kind of go about the science really quickly of storytelling and why it's so important that we are structuring stories, case studies, whether you're in sales, you're in marketing, business, or you're a leader, telling a story. It kind of, and I'm not a designer either, so let's just skip out on like the design aspect of my slides and go to the main points. When somebody's doing a presentation, there is a few parts of your brain that get activated. And that's all around language processing, right? It's just, and it's not very memorable. And it's just like, you ever sat in a sales meeting and tried to inspire people? It's like you're just giving them, but with data and information, maybe a sales engineer, sorry. But you know, it's just, it's not activating very many parts of the brain. Well, this is a little bit of what happens, or what could happen, when you're actually engaging in a meaningful story experience, whether it be how you actually helped your clients become like the hero of a project, or how you gave a case study, you helped a business that was failing, or just like the last talk, something really interesting about how you can reuse, or you can use, I didn't catch all of it, but Bitcoins and different currencies. So what happens in this case is all these other aspects of your brain get activated when you take people through stories. And in this case, the impressions become more memorable. It actually becomes an enlivened, awakened experience for your brain. I don't know if anybody's actually witnessed, seen all this, and I'm sure you guys have, but let me just kind of appease me and just walk through it. Hormones get released. We all know what that does to our body and brain, is when we wake up, we feel there's a feel good element to it. So neural coupling happens, and neural coupling is really like when someone's telling a story, their different parts of their brain lights up. They did a bunch of MRI studies where, you know, storytellers told audience stories, and they mapped parts of the brain. They were different when they started, but whenever the story started, both the audience and the storyteller, their brains started to light up at the same time, and the same parts of their brain, and it became this synchronized, aligned experience, which I think is extremely powerful if you think about it. Like, you could actually magically sit across from someone, tell them the story, get them engaged, and then all of a sudden do the voodoo magic and get them aligned with whatever it is, you know, the different parts of your brain that are activated. So what does that lead us to believe? That story and structured, like telling a really good story, actually creates some of the trust that's needed in business. There's influence, all the other amazing little word things that you can find around storytelling, empathy, listening, action, all these things that you see a lot of times in sales as well. So I believe that the power to being a powerful communicator is actually having a little bit of a format. So I'm going to actually just whiz you through what I believe is an excellent format that anyone can remember. It really starts with your audience and knowing who they are. So you're going to take your audience on a little journey, starting out where they are, what their status is, and then where you want them to be. And then you're going to address the obstacles that are in the way. And then you're going to make them the hero of that story. And in doing so, you've basically created the format for a really nice way of communicating a message. So literally what you're experiencing is like, we put all these things around stories, like, oh, how am I going to tell a story? And people get stuck. have a storytelling event going on, and people are like, I don't know what story to pick. And I'm like, what message do you want to share? Like, what's the message? So I'm going to skip through this really quickly because we all know that stories have an arc. And I'm just going to go to some questions for you guys. And these are going to be the questions that you really can ask yourself to identify a good story. And then you just plug it in. So I want you guys to think about I want you to think about maybe someone you need to communicate something to in a business situation or personal, whatever you want to think about. And really just know who that audience is. And when you figure out who that audience is, I want you to think about a message that you want to deliver to them. And as you start to really get clear about that message, then you're able to communicate a couple different things. One is you can use a case study or you can use a personal story. But all you need to do is think about what the current situation is for this particular client, let's say, or audience. And maybe they're sitting in the back of an IT office and they're like faced with how to bring all the people offline, online, offline, and how to figure out what systems to use. And maybe their world is so overwhelmed and they're in this current situation of flux. And then imagine what their life is like, how busy that just got. And then you might have a situation where do you want them to end? And hoping that you can actually offer a solution or give them some sort of way through this based on what your message is that you want to communicate. So that ending point becomes your end of your story, kind of the point A to B, which if we whiz right back up here, talking about your audience, you kind of map the journey, and then we just work through the obstacles, which is a lot about like solution-driven sort of exercises. And then you think about what the obstacles are standing in their way. Well, if this person would probably have lots of obstacles. This COVID happens, everybody goes home, everybody's working remote. Now I've got to figure out a system where I get everybody on, a cohesive system using firewall or whatever it is that they have their solution, and then, you start to see the obstacles and you pick a few obstacles that are standing in their way. And then you just talk about how to overcome those obstacles to get there. And hopefully you can offer them a solution, if not some sort of peace of mind. And if it's not a business related story that you're telling, then obviously it can also parlay into like personal stories, which is even more powerful. So when you start to really frame up your communication in this way, you start to also develop this ability for people to connect and relate. And they put themselves in you put yourself in their shoes, but they develop this trust with you that you understand where they are and what they're going through, because you've actually sort of mapped out and then made sure that like you kind of given them a resolve. I've been in sales meetings and I've been channel development meetings around the world, and expert teams, expert consulting sales, and very rarely do they ever talk about case studies or use examples like these story examples of how they helped somebody else. And it says it on the website and they expect people to read it, but they never really talk about it. And it's just such a missed opportunity for people to really understand and develop that trust with whatever you're offering. So I just think that I'm looking at this as, how can you use story, not as in the woo-woo terms of story, but in terms of like a structure and a format. How can you actually easily remember it and easily apply it and really start to weave your conversations and messages around these kind of communications so that you can actually make it really easy for the people that are listening. So that's what I'm proposing and inviting you to do, is to be thinking about what story you can share, what case study you can share to make your message relevant to them. And it can be a negotiation you might have with your partner if you need to, like, you know, what message do I want to communicate? Yeah, I want to communicate that I need the air in the bedroom to be a lot colder at night. So maybe you talk about a personal story that actually takes them through, like, you know, to develop empathy so that you can actually win that argument. But you get the point. It doesn't really matter. It's just a structure. It's just a formula. And if you follow it and you have it, you understand where people are. You understand you meet them where they are, but provide them with where they want to go or where they want to be, and show them the journey, and just be willing to expose your own personal stories to do that. I think you're stepping into more impact, bolder, and leadership. And I think that you can actually raise the vibes in terms of getting the attention and engagement and being memorable. So that's really my message. And of course, to tie it all up, why story? Just because I think it's the human experience, it connects us. And it's really like we're made up of little tiny stories ourselves, just a compilation of that. And it's kind of the thing that rocks my world. And so I thought I'd share it with you. I wanted to keep it zippy, short and sweet, and then open it up to any questions if you have anything, or a conversation.
I heard a story about stories recently.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And the reason that stories are so powerful to us as humans is that we evolved around the campfire. And there were two real sets of people. There were early birds and there were night owls. And the early birds were the ones that would get up at the crack of dawn and go and hunt the food down and to feed the village. And then there were the night owls. And the night owls would protect the village at nighttime from predators. And they had to stand around a fire and tell stories all night. And that's the reason why stories like get our brains going, because we've actually evolved with stories. That's what's actually kept us alive, awake, interested, engaged together as communities and tribes. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, there's so much, because, I mean, we even like the way we sort of put our life and explain our life into bite-sized pieces for people. It's actually structured around little stories as well. And we have dominating themes, and this is going a bit deeper, but we all have these sort of dominating narratives that we even personally tell ourselves about who we are and our identities. And sometimes those dominating stories actually are what prevents mind shifts and really like stepping into like more powerful leadership as well, and mindsets. And so I think that the idea of taking what we innately already do, externalizing it, and putting it in a digestible form just feels like it should be natural. And I'm very surprised that there's not an easier format out there for people just to plug and play, because we do revolve around these narratives. Like, I don't even know who I would be if I didn't pretend like and make up a story about every single thing that's gone on in my life. You know, without a story, we're not really creating sort of meaning. So anyway, that goes really deep, but I'm a bit of a deep person, so I think I'll just be all right.
Have you studied much of Marshall McLuhan and the medium is the message? And I'm wondering if you think that our like the massive increase in digital communication has actually affected our ability to, one, listen and stay entertained by stories, but actually two, actually communicate in stories. Because I notice there's a big difference between communicating with younger people and older people these days. older people will always tell something, but then tell a story around it to get the point across. And a lot of younger people are just caught up in the intellectual side of things. And unfortunately, I don't think are as powerfully communicating their point because they're missing that kind of human element of it.
Yeah, and there's also this idea of listening and attention. Obviously, listening is becoming such a, you know, we're all vying to be heard or to be listened to, or our words to land. And the space is noisy and there's a lot of chatter, and to be able to even be heard is difficult. And what's happening now, even in like the younger generations, is we'll be on one track and we'll divert our attention completely and abandon whatever we were doing there. So there's all these little pieces of sort of not necessarily structured communication. It's unstructured communications, just all flowing all over the place. It's not really like connected. And I think that that's part of what's happening with social as well. It's just a flipping, and it takes a lot of energy to like keep our attention on one thing for a given amount of time. So I think listening is becoming a really key part of, you know, how do we attract people to listen to anything, which is once again the story structure is just falling apart. But we never really had it in place. People will tell stories around campfires, but where do we have like an easy, even on Instagram, it's like, how do we actually tell this story in a 1, 2, 3 quick way so that it's like a full digestible story? It's not. They're just pieces. Collectively, there's a story. So I don't know. I think it's a great question. I think it's something to ponder. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that in the last few minutes? Nah, cool. Look, I appreciate your attention. I haven't done Unconference before, and I'm just really excited to maybe understand more about what I can bring so that I can create something also more meaningful to the audience. It's an incredible space to be in, to Skillshare, and I'm super thankful to be here right now, and for Michael and the team for really making it available and happen. So it's an honor. Yeah. So look, have a wonderful day. I can stay on for a few more minutes, but I think
I feel like you'd have to tell us a story now. You need to give us like a 5-minute story about something in your life. Like, it could be anything. It could be how you had to convince your partner to keep the room cooler at night, or any number of things.
Yeah, so I think I can do it in like 4 minutes, I hope. Usually it takes about 6. Yeah, 2014 or 15, I stepped off a flight from London, and I was stepped off a flight, and arrived in San Francisco because I decided that I was going to follow my heart. And I left a really good international job traveling, you know, France, Spain, everywhere, onboarding partners for this love. And I really felt like this was it. You know, someone was going to take care of all the parts of me, the complicated, the lovely, everything. And I was like following the flittering wings of love. And I actually didn't work that way for me. Everything sort of fell apart really quickly, and I was blaming and feeling it was all their fault, because it was, you know. And I'm a year later, I found myself sitting, you know, in this really beautiful mansion and overlooking San Francisco, and in this house, but feeling so empty and lost, and in a pile of clothes. And I didn't know what to do. I had this story running in my head for the entire year that I just wasn't worth love. I just wasn't, it wasn't going to happen for me. And I ran that story like a broken record over and over. And yeah, it was a tough year. Smoked a lot of cigarettes, drank a lot of wine. And I'm sitting in that pile of clothes, and a friend calls me and says, "Hey, Jen, I think you got to sort this out. Have you ever tried meditating?" And I was like, yeah, maybe. But I just didn't want to get still because I was afraid to get still. And I didn't want to like experience myself what was really going on. And I didn't want to listen. So I tried a couple other little moves, drank a bottle of wine a night, and then I got the call again. "Jen, I think you got to get still. I think you got to pick a direction. I think you got to pivot. I think you got to meditate." And I was like, "Oh, I think so." So I picked up meditation, and one day that led to the next. Got still, got quiet, got confident, and worked my way out of the situation and realized that home was really in my heart, and it was really with me here, right here in this moment, and it never left me. So yeah, it was a powerful time and an interesting experience. So thanks for listening. So follow your heart, follow your home.
Follow the charm. Thanks for sharing.
You've heard that before. Thanks, you guys. All right. See you later. Okay.